So guys, I'm here with a friend, Owen, today, and we're going to talk about some of the really fun cars you can buy for about $35,000, both new and used.
We're really excited to bring you this segment. There are three things we looked at when we were choosing our cars. So number one, it had to be really sporty and really fun to drive. So from this, we looked at rear-wheel drive cars. We also looked at cars that had over 300 plus horsepower. So you get that little bit of oomph, that little bit of kick in your stomach. And then lastly, we wanted something that looked sporty while being sporty too. So we looked mostly at coupes, so you could look good while you look fast.
All right, so the first pick for me is the Porsche 997. I think you guys will not be surprised with my choice. So for about $35,000, you can get yourself a 2007 Porsche 911 Carrera S with probably around 60,000 miles on it.
Nice. Is that how much you paid for yours?
So mine is actually a 2010 997.2, and I bought it a couple years ago. It had 57,000 miles on the odometer, and I paid $52,000 for it before tax.
Ooh, nice. Yeah, that's a good deal, man. Tell me a little bit more about the car.
Yeah, so it has 355 horsepower, so the 997.1s. This was a big improvement from the previous water-cooled 996. The looks was really good. It kind of went back to what the 911 should be with the round headlights. I think the car looks really great. So power-wise, I think that car is still fast today, but back in 2007, it was running high 12s and a quarter mile, which was actually even better back then.
That's awesome. So I've heard that Porsche has done a lot to kind of engineer around the fact that the engine's on the rear and it's a little bit bottom heavy. I think you were saying before that it's about 46% front, 56 rear, or was that something?
Yeah, so the weight distribution, it definitely has more of the weight in the back. I don't know the exact specs, but it's actually one of the only cars that I know of that has the engine behind the rear axle. So this creates much different driving experience than having the engine in the front and even in the middle. It makes the turn-in, really, really light and responsive because you don't have all that weight over the front end. And additionally, with the engine being in the back, it's really advantageous for acceleration and braking because you have all the weight over the rear tires when you need to accelerate. And as you're slowing down, you have the weight behind the rear axle, which is then wanting to move forward to the front and the rear wheels. Whereas, if you have the engine in the front, you have the front tires doing most of the work.
Yeah. So I've actually test driven a couple 911s. I went to a Porsche road show where you actually got to drive the 911 on the track, and I actually spun out the 911. So I've heard they've solved a lot of the issues with oversteer, at least when you're casually driving. Have you? I mean, you daily drive your 911 a lot. Have you ever experienced oversteer in normal driving conditions, or even when you push it hard?
Yeah, so you can definitely get oversteer easily with the car once you have the Porsche stability management turned off. But with the 997s and even the 991s now, Porsche has done a pretty good job of kind of tuning the suspension to kind of mitigate some of that oversteer bias in the previous generations. So yeah, I mean, the 997 to me is a car that really stands out for about $35,000. It is also very usable, with back seats, so it's good for kids. You can also store a bunch of stuff back there as well. So overall, because of the reliability, the looks, the driving dynamics, the acceleration, it was my top choice for a car in the $35,000 range.
Cool.
All right, so enough about the Porsche. Let's move on to Owen's pick.
For me, my top pick is actually a new car. It's the 2017 Ford Mustang, and the reason for that is I'm not as talented at fixing up cars as Dennis is here. So I kind of really value the reliability of a new car, and no new sporty car stood out to me as much as the Mustang, and in particular the EcoBoost Mustang.
Yeah, so the EcoBoost, it's weird that it's a 4-cylinder turbocharged, and it's in the middle of the pack between the V6 and the V8. So I know it has something around 310 horsepower. It's fairly fast. Well, I shouldn't say it's fast. It's fairly quick. It runs anywhere between low 14s to potentially high 13s in a quarter mile. I have seen some videos though with just some basic bolt-ons, some ECU tuning, the car getting down into low 13s.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say it's probably not the fastest car in this pack. But uh, I think the thing about the Mustang for me is that it's the car that I would drive the fastest. Like if I had a 911 or an M3 or any of the other cars that we talked about in this segment, I would probably baby the crap out of it. Like I would like put it in the car wash. I drive it like a little bit and like not rev it up too high. If I drove the Mustang, I would feel okay about going all out, which not on public roads, but I think um, you know maybe it would be the fastest car for me out of the bunch out over here.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like aside from the budget, we talked offline, and you said the EcoBoost was your favorite Mustang because of kind of the weight distribution, or I'm sorry, yeah, the weight distribution of the lighter engine versus the V8. So you've driven both, and what was your impression between the V8 Mustang and also the EcoBoost?
Yeah, definitely. So I think handling is a huge plus for like the new generation of Mustangs. So first of all, before we even talk about the different types of engines in the Mustang, the biggest change from the previous generation to this generation is the independent rear suspension. So in the last generation of Mustang, there was a solid rear axle, which means like the two wheels are connected, the two rear wheels are connected. So if one wheel hits a pothole, the other wheel would bump up. But now the Mustangs have independent rear suspension, which means if you roll over a pothole on this wheel, the other wheel probably won't move as much. So it makes for much better handling. So the EcoBoost Mustang, I thought when comparing to the GT, was even better of a handler, and the reason for that is because the inline four weighs much less than the GT's like V8. So with the inline four, the Mustang EcoBoost has a 52 to 48 weight distribution. So it's still a little bit not exactly where you want with the 50-50, but it's the best that the Mustang has ever gotten to 50-50. And so when you drive them back to back, you definitely feel it.
So now we're going to move on to my next pick, which is the E92 M3. So for about $35,000, you can get yourself a 2011 E92 M3, and the E92 is the coupe. The E90 is the four-door version, and you can get an M3 with probably around 30 to 40,000 miles. So still a fairly new vehicle in really good condition. But I really like the M3 because it, in my opinion, looks really sleek. It also is the right size. I feel the new M3s and M4s have just gotten much bigger, so I think it's a really cool car. And it's definitely a big plus that it's the one and only M3 to have a V8 in it.
Yeah, definitely. The thing that I found a little bit weird about the M3's engine, though, was it's got a ton of horsepower. It was like 414 horsepower of course, when you rev it up all the way high in the rev range. But the torque was a little bit low. I thought like it was 295 foot-pounds of torque, which is like over 100 difference from the horsepower. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we think of V8s, we're kind of used to like the V8s in muscle cars, that are using a lot more of this displacement. The E92 M3 V8 engine, I believe, is a 4-liter, and it's really kind of designed to develop power in a linear fashion. So torque is going to build up gradually as well. I think there's nothing wrong with that. You probably won't have as much torque down low, but because of the way the engine can build power pretty linearly, I think that makes it a really rewarding experience. So as you're revving the engine all the way up to red line, the car continues to make power.
Yeah.
But Owen, I know you owned, was it a E92 BMW yourself, not an M3, but you have a new 435 now. So kind of what has your experience been like with owning BMWs?
Yeah, so I actually owned a E93, so a 328 convertible a while ago, and it was really fun. I mean, of course, it's no comparison to the M3 in terms of like driving dynamics or how fast it is or any of the performance criteria. But you definitely feel like the BMW craftsmanship, especially around like steering and handling. I would imagine the M3 to be a much tighter version of one of my favorite cars that I've ever driven. So the last car I chose was the S5, and in particular the S5 from the Audi S5 from 2012. And the reason why I chose the 2012 one was that's the last year that they had the 4.2 liter V8 powering the S5. The year afterwards, they went into their 3 liter turbocharged V6, which although it's a more efficient engine, it definitely doesn't have the same power or the same heart and soul as the V8. When I think about the Audi S5, I kind of think of it as what kind of car would Steve Jobs design? It's got that timeless beauty, the lines. I saw an S5 from years ago, like the other day, and it still looked really good. And I think if you're looking for like beauty in addition to go fast driving, that could be a really great option.
Yeah, so the S5, I guess one thing I have to call out is it is not a rear-wheel drive car. It's a quattro.
Yeah, definitely. And that could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing, So the pros, you definitely have a lot more traction. So when if you're worried about your acceleration or putting power down on the road, it'll the quattro will be able to distribute the power to all four wheels. That kind of explains why the S5 actually has like 0 to 60 numbers in 4.5 seconds, which is a little bit faster than what you expect for a car with an engine of around like 350 horsepower. The other pro of the Quattro is that it's actually practical. So we lived in Boston for a couple of years, and if you lived in Boston, you most likely wouldn't be buying like a 911 to daily drive. You probably wouldn't buy an M3 to daily drive. You definitely wouldn't buy a Mustang to daily drive. But I could see myself buying the S5 to daily drive. The downside though is that all this is like super heavy. Like it's the S5 is built on Audi's like MPB the car platform, and it's fundamentally a front wheel drive platform, which means that the car itself is based on a front wheel drive car, which means that it's the weight distribution is 56-44, and when you're turning, you feel that it doesn't feel as quick as any of the other cars that we mentioned here.
Yeah, so I think I agree with your assessment. Of the bunch, it's probably the most practical. It has a very usable full-size back seat. In addition, and additionally, like it still looks good even after several years. So I think the S5 could definitely be a good choice for someone who's looking for a practical car that's still a bit sporty.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're going to move to kind of the final part of this talk here. We're just going to evaluate the cars and see how they do in each of the different criteria we set out to judge these cars. So the very first and somewhat controversial criteria is going to be around looks. Of the 4 cars we talked about, the Mustang, the 911, the M3, and also the S5, what do you think is the best looking of the bunch and the worst looking?
Okay, so I feel I'd probably be a little bit biased, and I know I'll probably differ from you in our opinions, but I'd say like number 1 for me is probably the S5, just for all the reasons that I mentioned before. Number 2 is the 911. I mean, you got that classic shape. Everyone knows what the 911 is when they see it, and it still looks stunning today. Number 3, I'd say probably M3, and the reason I ranked it a little bit lower is there's a ton of like 3 Series out there, and for someone who doesn't know what the M stands for, the M3 kind of looks like just like any other 3 Series, and that might be a good thing. That might be a bad thing. Lastly, I'd say Mustang. I mean, personally, I think it looks much better than the Camaro, but it does look like it's starting to get dated. It's only been out for like a couple years, and looking back for like 10 years from today, I could definitely see the S5, the 911 still looking great, but not so sure about the other cars. So I think our second criteria is actually handling. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we can both agree that the best handling of the bunch is going to be the 997. Not only because of it being a true sports car compared to the rest of the vehicles, it's also the lightest at around 3,100 pounds. The heaviest of the bunch, the S5, is closer to 4,000 pounds. So that's a big weight difference. The Mustang and the M3 are right at about 3,700 pounds. So the 911, I think, is the hands down first place winner cars.
I actually have to disagree with you a little bit on the 911. Yeah, so maybe I'm just a terrible driver, but I would probably put the M3 as number 1, 911 as number 2. Uh, Probably Mustang is number 4, and then the S5. You know, it's really fat. Like you said, it was 4,000 pounds, so it has to be last.
I think we agree that the top two handling cars are the M3 and the 911. I think the 911 in a skilled driver's hands is definitely going to be the fastest of the bunch. But the M3, with more of the engine or I guess the weight in the front, I think it's probably going to be a little bit more forgiving than the 911. All right, so moving on to the next criteria, which is acceleration. This is one of the less debatable ones because the numbers don't lie. So in terms of sheer acceleration, it's a close tie for first place between the 997 and the M3. The M3, even though it has 414 horsepower versus the 911's 355, I've actually seen some videos of the two racing, and it's fairly even, but the 911 does walk away from the M3. And then if we jump to kind of the third and fourth place, so in third place would be the S5. It runs around a mid to low 13-second quarter mile. And in last place, we have the Ford Mustang EcoBoost, which runs around a 14-second quarter mile.
Cool. So next on our list is interior.
Yeah, so I guess the interior, we're not necessarily going to debate which interior looks better. That's very subjective, but what we're going to talk about is the build quality, which really matters for the interior because that's where you're going to be spending the time in the car, and that's what you're going to experience. So what are your thoughts on the interior build quality of the four? You've owned a couple BMWs, I own a 911, you've ridden in the Ford Mustangs, and I've also have ridden in several Audis.
Yeah, definitely. So all I'm going from is my experience sitting in these cars for a little bit and driving these cars for a little bit. I'd say like number one, it was really tough. It was between either the S5 or the 911. And with the S5, I think there's a little bit more focus on like luxury of the interior, and so I have to give it a small edge. I think the 911 can beat the S5, but you just have to like option it up like so much, right? Like you have to put a lot of money into it to get the leather seats, to get the power seats, to get the nice steering wheel, the nice options on the dash. I'd say if for something that's within our cost range, maybe the S5 beats out the 911. Third, I'd go with the M3. Like BMW's interiors are really nice, really classy, but they're also Spartan. And lastly, I'd say the Mustang. Although if you do go for the premium package, it really it takes it up to another level inside. So it could be something to consider. All right. So our next criteria is running costs. So what do you think about running costs, Dennis?
Yeah. So running costs, I think the top choice. It's pretty clear cut. The Ford Mustang. Ford parts are pretty cheap. Fords are pretty reliable nowadays, and it's a brand new car with a factory warranty. In second and third place, I think this one's a little bit tough. We'd probably look at either the 911 or the Audi. I'm more inclined to say that the 911 is a bit more reliable and doesn't have as many failures as the Audi. However, the Audi is a newer car for $35,000, so you might even be under factory warranty or could get the vehicle through the CPO program. So that would kind of offset that a bit. And then I think last place would definitely be the M3. While it's relatively reliable compared to other BMWs, it does have a potential issue with the rod bearings. And if that goes out, you essentially have to replace the entire engine.
Yeah, which makes the car a little bit of a risky pick in my mind. So I agree with all that. The other thing I just want to add there is like looking at the fuel economy. Your M3 is going to run you 14.20 on the tank of gas. So you're probably going to be spending a lot of money on gas if you're going to be daily driving that car.
Well, so 14 in the city, 20 on the highway. That's actually probably the worst of the bunch. I think the best is probably going to be the EcoBoost in terms of gas. So yeah, I think that's pretty much right. In terms of maintenance, I would recommend with the M3 to probably budget anywhere between $3,000 and $4,000 a year on maintenance and any repairs that you need to do. For the Audi and the Porsche, you could probably budget around $2,000 for each. And with the Mustang, I mean, you're probably going to be doing just basic maintenance on that, which should be fairly cheap. All right, so we talked about the different criteria. Now we're going to basically give you guys a recommendation on which car you should pick based on your situation. So I think if you want a sports car that's going to be an occasion when you get in, that's going to have the best driving dynamics, hands down the 911 is for you. However, it is the least practical of the bunch. The back seats really can't fit adults in, just young kids.
Yeah, no, but I think if you are looking for the practical sports car and a car that'll look good 10 years down the road, you can't go wrong with the S5.
Yeah, the S5, with it being Quattro, it's going to be great if you live in places that get a lot of snow. So I agree, of the bunch, the S5 is the most practical. However, it's also the least sporty of the bunch. All right, the Mustang. What are your thoughts on the Mustang?
Yeah, I think if you're looking for a car that's relatively relatively fine, something that you can mod yourself. So if you're interested in in personalizing your car, Mustang's great. Mustang's probably great for you. If you're someone who's who would normally baby a really nice car like I would, then the Mustang would actually let you drive it more flat out, which might turn out to be a better experience. So that could be for you.
Yeah, and then the final car is the M3. I think if you want a really sporty car that you can still haul around some adults that aren't too big, the M3 is definitely going to be it. It's I'd say the second most practical of the cars, and it looks great, it drives great. So if you need something that is one of the sportiest of the bunch and is very usable, the M3 would be great for that. Well, car fanatics, thanks for watching this video. This is our first time trying this format. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel if you like it, and give the video a thumbs up.
All right, nice to meet you guys. I'll see you later.